Hi, everyone. Today, my colleagues Curtis, Nicholas, Jack, and Todd are joined by Kessler Douglas, who is a jazz bassist who is working on his Masters of Music program at Carleton University in Ottawa. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Nicholas to start some questions.
For sure. So just to break the ice, a little quick question to get us get the ball rolling is just what got you into music and the performing arts?
Yeah, uh, that's a big question. I mean, I've been playing music for my whole life, really. I started guitar lessons when I was 7, and I got into like some singer-songwriter type of stuff when I was a kid. Also, I was part of an organization in Edmonton that was for like youth singer-songwriters. And from there, I kind of met a lot of people and started to get into rock and played in some rock bands and some funk and blues stuff. And then that was kind of like the gateway drug for jazz for me. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people get into jazz through Rush indirectly, which is kind of a weird thing. But anyway, so kind of in that circuit. But yeah, so there you go. Rock, Rush, and then I started I had a bass teacher who offered me a gig on bass. And then I started playing more bass than anything else. And then the jazz and the bass kind of just took off. And then here we are.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Everything together. Kessler, I noticed you started playing around 7 years old. I started playing the piano around that age, relatively around 5 years old. And as I progressed and started playing like proper classical music in the conservatory and stuff and began to memorize my pieces, I almost started playing through like muscle memory and stuff like that. I was wondering if you could speak on your favorite part about performing, and is there anything specific you think about while performing, whether it is going with the flow or is it notes?
Yeah, that's also an interesting question because I don't know, you can think about a lot of different things depending on the setting, what you're doing. But I don't know, for example, I really like playing with other people, I would probably say is the thing, would be the biggest thing, because then I guess in some ways the goal is not to be really thinking in some ways about what you're playing, but it's more like listening and engaging and having a conversation with people. So in some ways that's kind of the coolest thing, and that's what I try to think about, is almost get to like a meditative state of not thinking really and just kind of, listening and being there, playing what you hear, if that makes sense, rather than of thinking about what you're doing, more just kind of trying to get to a state where it's kind of just happening naturally. So kind of what you're saying about the muscle memory thing.
Yeah, as a piano person, you're always playing just by yourself. So as someone who plays with other people, it's interesting to hear that perspective. My final thing is, this is kind of an open-ended question, and we kind of intended it to be that way. Just straight up, where do you see your music going in the future?
Yeah, so, well, I guess like everything else, I feel like that could be a huge question. But for this past album, I did, as kind of an experiment to try to, like a DIY thing of doing everything myself and playing all the instruments and self-producing it and mixing it and everything, which, I mean, I learned a lot from it, and there were some cool things about it. But and also, like, that was partly just with the pandemic, like a lot of people I feel like did that, like, we're like, oh, I'm gonna go into my own little room and do everything myself. But I'm definitely looking forward to, again, like I was kind of saying with the last question, playing with other people again. So I mean, I could see myself going lots of places with music, but probably the one thing that I am thinking right now is I very much look forward to collaborating with people and playing some shows with other people again.
Yeah, expanding post-pandemic, I think, is what a lot of people are excited for.
I had a quick thing I wanted to chime in on, because you said something about like conversations with the people that you're playing with. And do you mean like actual conversations, like in between little sets or in between songs, or you just mean like nonverbal communication? Like, can you elaborate on that a bit? Just because coming from like a somewhat of a non-music background, because I said my uncle plays, but my dad's side, he just plays the drums, Motley Crue, hitting the skins every now and then, but nothing too crazy. So I just wanted to, if you could elaborate on that a bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, so, okay, actually, I'll reconnect this also to a question you asked a minute ago, Jack, but or something you mentioned again about the muscle memory thing. But so a lot of the music that I play and that I like to play involves a lot of improvisation. So, and that can look like a lot of different things. I mean, sometimes it's like you're playing kind of pretty old music, like for example, like blues stuff. A lot of that, there's a long tradition of that, and a lot of the songs themselves have a big history to them, but you're kind of reinterpreting them every time you play them. And then some of it is even a little bit more kind of free, and kind of see where things go. I mean, my process even for this album for different degrees with different tracks, but like the last one on the album, I actually didn't have any plan going into it, and I kind of just started doing things and then just kept adding things that I thought sounded right. So in terms of having a conversation, like playing with other people, what I'm getting at is kind of that idea of just negotiating kind of this improvisational setting where everybody's kind of like, okay, well, what if I play this? And then someone else goes, oh, okay, well, if you play that, I'm going to play this. And it kind of, that's the cool part, is then you start building off of each other and creating something collectively. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. I never thought of it like that.
To pivot the conversation towards your new album, Hellas, one thing I noticed looking through the track list was there seems to be historical references to the naming of songs, particularly from what I've seen, ancient Greek history, and just really wondering how that influenced your creative process, and also if that was the sole inspiration behind the album itself, or if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, so I think with a lot of art stuff, there are often kind of at least two major things that factor into what you do. And so one of them is kind of, I don't know, what I might call like a purely creative thing, where I'm like, okay, I have some ideas for what I want to do musically and what I want it to sound like, or some sounds I want to explore or whatever. So that's one side of it. And so part of it was, honestly, I had just written a bunch of tunes about a year ago from now. Just kind of, I had some creative ideas and just wrote some things down. And then, I don't know, by the summer, I was like, oh, okay, I've got some things together. Maybe I could make an album. So that was one side of it. And then, but then as I was creating them, that's where the other side of this comes in, where I was like, okay, then there also, what do I want to say with this music? So like, I don't know. And it's always to different degrees. I mean, some music doesn't have to be about something necessarily, or commenting on something, or some art doesn't have to be explicitly that. But for this, yeah, I have a big interest in history in general. So I wanted to capture that in some way with this, especially because this is in some ways the first, I don't know, longer form thing that I'm putting out there. And again, I put it together mostly myself. So I'm like, okay, I want to have some kind of personal connection. And so I decided to write, or at least while I was writing these tunes, kind of connect them to my interest in history. And then from there, that kind of inspired me to think about, well, I don't want to just talk about Greek history in general, because I don't know, that's kind of overdone in some ways. It's, yeah, people have been talking about that for over 2,000 years. What am I going to add to the conversation? But so more where I wanted to go with it was to kind of comment on it. And obviously there's no lyrics, so I don't think people would really get this a lot, but I wanted to kind of comment on the way that these stories kind of are used over time. And so we're still telling these stories 2,500 years later, but the way that they're told are different, and the context in our society is different. And so kind of just commenting on the way that these stories kind of change to fit the times that they're in over time. So even with some of it, I tried to take some things and again, put them in a contemporary musical style to kind of reinforce that. And I mean, I could go into detail about how each track has like some specific aspects of it that are related to certain historical figures' lives. I'll just maybe mention one thing there. The acroamapt is, I think, what the track is called, but it stands for a conceptual representation of the military and political defections of Alcibiades, something like that. I might have got one of them mixed up there. But Alcibiades basically swapped sides a number of times, kind of during the Greco-Persian Wars. You probably know 300, that kind of thing was that period. But he swapped sides a number of times. And so I tried to reflect that in the music by having like the same kind of melody and have these chords using a diminished chord, which is symmetrical, and it kind of rotates around that and rotates the same melody around it to kind of show, to reflect his personal, I don't know, shifting sideness. So there's one example of how I tried to bring the historical thing into the music there.
Blew my mind.
That's neat. And also just to build on that, because I know each song does have, you know, its own meaning and significance that can be applied to any time period, including now. For you though, personally, is there a song that out of those which means the most to you more than the others?
Yeah, I mean, because I wrote them each as separate songs, in a way, each of them does have a slightly different thing about it. But I think actually I would come back to that same one I mentioned earlier, which is the last track, Dieus of Megalopolis, the Battle of Corinth, because on the one hand, the process for creating that was a lot more improvised and spontaneous. And actually, I don't know, it starts with like a little 30-second clip, which if you listen probably is like, whoa, what's this? This is bizarre. And that was actually from like a campfire jam last summer. Me and a couple of my friends were playing, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna just record some of this. And then I was like, okay, if I'm trying to capture this song that's kind of about the end of Hellenic civilization and after which the Romans like destroyed this city, I'm gonna try to make this weird, like unsettling thing that kind of transitions from that. So I enjoyed that because it's kind of a subtle, I don't know, Easter egg of like, oh, there's some of my friends who are on this album kind of indirectly, even though they didn't expect to be. And again, I just enjoyed the process of kind of seeing what I could do with that and trying, like, kind of putting all these instruments in there. Like I put in some banjo things and some classical guitar, and I messed around with some percussion instruments, and I had double bass and electric bass. Yeah. So yeah, I would say that's my favorite if I had to pick one.
Nice. Yeah, no, I think a lot of people, I think, well, for me, I didn't notice that on the first listen through. So that's something that'll be, I think, neat to share with people on that song particularly. And really my last question here is, I know that jazz music, especially as you were just describing, tends to really, one of the core elements is improvisation. And you know, you mentioned how that's a fun part of performing for you. Out of these songs on this album, did you have, is there one that you particularly enjoy to perform?
Yeah, and again, I would say that maybe different ones for different reasons. But again, if I had to pick one, I think the Acro Amapt one would be my favorite, because that one, I don't know, it's a little bit supposed to be a little bit kind of like a cheeky, funky tune. And when I played that live a couple times, it's just a lot of fun to sit on it, because in a lot of ways compared to the other ones, it's a little bit less, I don't know, it's a bit less different things going on. It's a little bit more consistent, but there's something cool about that, especially when like playing with other people, because you can kind of just sit in it and see what happens, which I enjoy.
Yeah, no, it's like each song is its own vibe is really what I'm trying to say. And that's kind of neat to know some of the backstory there. Kind of adds even more depth for me when I'll listen to it again. So that's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same for me. But to build off what you just said, because I was going to ask you if you had performed any songs off the album yet, but you said that you have. So I was going to ask, you know, maybe how many performances you've done with it, how have those gone, and the whole idea of, since you made the whole album by yourself, but there's all these different instruments, like you must have a band that you play with.
Yeah. So, sorry, I'm just holding myself back because I'm like, oh, I have so many things I could say about that. But no, what I'll stick to is, so yeah, I played. I mean, the biggest thing was that I had kind of an album release show in Edmonton last summer, before, like literally actually the day before that I drove from Edmonton to Ottawa, and the day before that I left, I played an album release show, even though the album actually didn't come out then, but the singles did, 2 singles, so maybe that works.
Nice.
Yeah, and played it with a band, and it was completely different because, yeah, I can't have, like, some of the tracks there's like 30 instruments going at the same time, and like a lot of them are kind of little subtle things or like doubling things, but I can't hire however many musicians to do all those different things. So yeah, it was cool though in a way, and I have a recording of that I'm hoping actually to release some of the live audio from, but it was really cool seeing how the band really brought those tunes to life in a really different way. And unfortunately, I'm sad that since I've been in Ottawa, I mean, my original plan was I would like drive over here and I would do a little tour and end in Ottawa and kind of play a show, but because of the pandemic and like various other things, it didn't end up happening. But I actually am looking forward to this coming summer, doing some shows in Ottawa, hopefully, and I'd like to bring some of those tunes out and get some Ottawa musicians to play them and give them a fresh coat of paint.
For sure. So the main bands you play with, are those the guys that are in Edmonton?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so this is one of the things that I was worried about going on too long of a thing, but I'll try to briefly, because what I'm getting at, I guess, is it's a really interesting question, because I think that on the one hand, in the jazz world, and in some ways with various different kinds of music, there's less of a system of having like, oh, this is my band and this is who I always play with and whatever. There's often a little bit more of a culture of like, oh, I'm going to play a show here. Who's free then? Who do I want to play with me? And so it kind of is a little bit more fluid. But I think especially with the way that the pandemic has changed music and kind of, again, gotten a lot of people to be individual and sit in their rooms and do their thing. And now as we're transitioning out of that, I think, and a lot of people are also have their own setup at home increasingly, and with things like with computers, you can record at home. And so everyone's like, it's becoming a lot less centralized. Like people aren't having to go to record studios or, go to record labels or like go record at a big studio or whatever. Increasingly, like you can do more at home. And so I think the industry in general is a little bit moving towards a stage where people are actually a little bit more kind of working on a more fluid basis and kind of centered more around their own artistry. So that was, again, that's my very long tangent just to say, that's also how I would describe kind of a lot of what I do. I am part of some projects that I would say are kind of a sort of a set group of people, but in general, a lot of the stuff that I play, and especially when it's the music I write, I don't necessarily have one set band who does it. I mean, there are some musicians who I often play with and I like to, but it is kind of flexible.
Yeah, I just found that interesting because I was looking through your YouTube, and then in the description you have like who's playing each instrument for each of your songs or performances. And I noticed that there was like some interchanging, like there's a couple guys that stayed the same, but there's other musicians that were coming in and out. So I was curious on the process, and that helped give some insight to it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, sorry, and again, I'm doing a master's in music and culture right now, so I feel like, again, I could write a 30-page paper on that, and I'm very interested in that. So thanks for indulging me on my comments on the music industry in general.
For sure.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned that you self-produced the album. So I was gonna ask like how that went, but I'm thinking to ask like if you could like have any help with any aspect of the production process, what part would you most like to like not be hand off or get some advice or get some help with?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah. So yeah, I did self-produce it. And I mean, actually, I'll say two things. One, I did outsource the mastering of it, which is usually like the final stage in an album, and it's kind of taking all of the tracks on the album and kind of standardizing them a little bit and getting it kind of prepped for radio or for listening on like a streaming service, because you don't want to be like, I don't know, listening to a playlist and suddenly have one song that's like super loud. So anyway, kind of that kind of thing. I was like, I don't need to learn all of that, so I outsourced that. And I did have a lot of help and advice from a lot of people during the process too, which like I don't know, if you go to my Bandcamp link, I think I list like a bunch of, I don't know, acknowledgements and people that I'm thankful for. And you can even see there's a whole bunch of people who I think helped me a lot put it together. But again, going forward, if I was to do another album right away, I would definitely, on the one hand, I would definitely want to play with some other people, get some other musicians playing, because just again, having some other people's ideas, getting other people in the conversation is great. And then also, as much as I enjoyed a lot of like the mixing and stuff like that, I would think I can see more and more why it's useful to have like at least a producer there, just someone else to give some input on the final things. Because the more and more time you kind of spend on one project and you listen to the same songs, like however many hundreds of times over months, and like at the end of that, you're like, I don't know what I'm even listening for anymore. This is just like, like, you know, when you say a word over and over and it stops meaning anything, like it kind of feels like that. And I'm like, I don't even know what to say anymore. Yeah. So I would definitely just get some other input somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So I guess moving forward for your next album, you might look to maybe I guess get some more input and stuff. And do you think in the future you'll ever like want to master your own album and like do kind of everything yourself? It's like, you know, fully yourself?
Yeah, again, one of the reasons I did this and one of the things that I do like is kind of learning more about all aspects of the process and getting new skills. So in some ways, yeah, but on the other hand, I hope that, again, especially with the way that the pandemic was, that I will never be in a position where I'll feel that isolated again in some ways. So
yeah,
in some ways it might be cool, but I hope I don't have to.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it's pretty cool how you mentioned that with like jazz music, especially like you kind of prefer, you know, playing with other people, like different people. So I find in other genres, like people like having like their set band and not really like changing much from that. So I guess I kind of want to ask like what your favorite part of performing with like different people are. Is it like, you know, like just that experience of learning new things or like playing with them? Like what's the most, I guess like the most rewarding part of playing with different musicians?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think like a lot of things, there's kind of two sides to that coin. Because I mean, on the one hand, and like you mentioned, Nicholas, a minute ago, I do sometimes play with the same drummer and the same piano player, the same guitar player often. So there's something about, even when you're doing improvised music, about like just being comfortable together and knowing that you know kind of some of the same things and you can read each other's things well. And there's something really cool about that. And that's one of the reasons why, even with this kind of open-ended culture, you still end up gravitating towards the same people, especially if you really like one person's playing. But on the other hand, there's something really, really cool about playing with new people, and especially if they've listened to different things than you have, or they have different ideas, because sometimes they'll play something and you go, oh, whoa, that's so cool. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, it's, again, back to the conversation thing. Like, if I always just talk to the same 3 people, I would not learn very many new things. But if I don't know, go and like meet somebody new, sometimes that's like the coolest conversation. It's like someone you've never met before, when they have like a completely different life experience than you, or you are able to connect about something, but you've had a completely, I don't know, different way of getting there or something.
For sure, yeah. I guess the more people you know, the more you can learn. It's very interesting. I guess lastly, it's going towards like the platforms. What platforms can it be purchased on, and where can we like listen to it like in its entirety?
Shameless plug.
All right. So, well, okay. So there's a lot of places that the album is available. And again, being the 21st century, a lot of it is you can find it through my website. So if you go to KesslerDouglas.com, you'll be able to find all of the different streaming services and links and stuff there. But also, the best place to get the music in one sense is on Bandcamp, because that way you can buy the music and download it. And the most of the money goes directly to musicians. So in terms of, if you wanted to, and if you're interested in having the music long term, that's probably what I would say is the best place, on bandcamp.com, which again, you can find a link on my website. I also have it streaming on Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal. Those are probably the big ones. And then you can find a lot of other cool things on my social media. So if you look up Kessler Douglas on YouTube, you can find it. Kessler Douglas Music on Facebook, and at Kessler_Douglas.promotion on Instagram, where there's some cool new content going on there. And also there is a Linktree link in the bio on that page, where you can also find places to stream it and other social media links. So check all of those out.
You know, just one thing that I was just thinking about, we did a case study on jazz for this class, and one thing that, you know, that I was looking into for my report was, you know, the impact that of the pandemic on this particular genre, especially in live performances. And it's to my understanding, you know, being improvisation, that's large in the genre as you're recording, but also in live performances. But it goes the other side too, from what I've gathered, that, you know, having a live audience there can make a difference too. Would you find that that, you know, the absence of a live audience kind of makes it more difficult to perform now?
Yes. Yeah. So on the one hand, I think a lot of people did this also with the pandemic, but I mean, I feel like there's two kind of main things people did. One, they were like, I'm going to put out videos, or I'm going to record again at my house and record some little things of me doing stuff, or do some cool projects with multi-tracking and using some recording software on your computer. And then I think also a lot of people were like, oh, you know what? I'm going to do live stream concerts, because that's like the closest thing to having like a live concert experience. And so I did a number of those. And yeah, it's definitely quite a different experience. I mean, it's funny almost going back through like a live stream thing and going like, oh, look, people were like commenting through the whole thing and stuff like that. But like, especially with, I don't know, especially when there's energetic music, and not just jazz, but I don't know, I feel like any music, like people are making noise, and you can see people moving, and I mean, even the fact that there's like conversations going on and glasses clinking, and, you know, those kind of things like give some life to the atmosphere. Like, I don't know, like when you're listening to any kind of album, it's not like it sounds like, oh yeah, this, if I close my eyes, I can just imagine I'm at a live show. Like, it's not really like that, you know. There's a very different atmosphere of being at a live thing. And to bring in the conversation thing one last time, it's also not just a conversation between the musicians. There's it's not just like the people going to see a show just sit there silently and still the entire time like statues. Like, they're also taking part in some way. They're active members of that environment. So there's definitely something that's lost when you're just playing, even if it's you and one or two other people just sitting in a room. It's very different, I think, experience than being in a room full of people.
Yeah, totally. So I'm sure for you and everyone here, you know, it'll be nice that things are going back to normal, and having that kind of atmosphere that you're describing, feeling the energy in the room from both sides, you know, from the audience and the other musicians, including yourself. Yeah, thank you. That was cool.
Just having to do with that music video that we were talking about for Diasis of Megalopolis, the Battle of Corinth. I just want to know about like how it's being produced. What kind of music video is it? Is it animated? Is it live action? Like, what's coming of this music video?
Yeah, that's a great point. So although I don't have any specific plans for live shows yet, although I'm hoping that I'll be playing some shows in Edmonton in June and July, and in Ottawa otherwise. So again, follow those social media links or the website for that good stuff. But other than that, the only like concrete thing, is this music video, which I'm excited about, because I wanted to take it in a slightly abstract direction, because the album's already kind of a weird abstract thing. So I've got one of my good friends from Edmonton who has done a fair amount of work with digital media and stuff, and he's actually animating. Basically, I don't know. Have any of you seen like Greek ceramic pottery? And it's kind of got like designs around it, or even if you've seen the Disney Hercules movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's, you know, it starts that there's kind of like this, it's like this art that kind of turns into the animation.
Mhm.
Okay, well, it's kind of that vibe in a way. So it's, yeah, the idea is that it kind of looks like a ceramic thing, and then it's again a little bit kind of minimalist and stuff, but it kind of it's like there'll be a boat going through some water, and various things are happening. There's storms and stuff like that. So again, kind of just an abstract thing that kind of connects the Greek aspect to the narrative and the flow of the piece.
Oh, wow. Oh, I think that's really cool. Tying it in with, well, the theme of the album, obviously, in the song, but just to have that aspect of, like, I don't know, I guess Greek, not heirlooms, but something that was like part of their culture to be involved in the music video. I think that's really cool. Sweet.
Cool. Well, thanks for meeting with us again. Yeah, it was a great meeting. Thanks again.
Yeah.